in 2012, halftime of a Sunday night football game, you spoke about Jovan Belcher had just had a murder suicide, and you spoke about gun culture on air in our country, and you received a lot of flack for it from a lot of people, and you stood by it, but you also clarified what a touchy issue it is. And here we are a decade later, and as you reflect on that, what are your thoughts now?
Well, it keeps happening. Sandy Hook happened only weeks later. And when I was subsequently interviewed about it, I said, sadly, we're going to see this happen again and again. And tragically, that turns out to be true. What I said was misinterpreted, but as I've said before, that's on me. Usually I'm a pretty competent broadcaster, and I'll get my point across with a fair amount of precision. In this case, we were rushed. I didn't know that they were going to ask me to comment about this until late in the second quarter of the game. And even then, we didn't know how much time we'd have because it was an unusual halftime without highlights. They devoted all of it to looking at the Belcher incident. They had lots of sound from Brady Quinn, who then was the Chiefs quarterback, and others. They did a very poignant segment from the studio in New York. And then I wound up having just a short amount of time. And I came into it with the idea that if I'm going to address this at all, I'm going to address a sports cliche, and there are many sports cliches that we all find annoying if we have half a brain. One of the worst is anytime something significant, especially if it's tragic, outside the realm of sports happens, then almost every broadcaster looks solemnly into the camera and says, this really puts it all in perspective, which is a crock, because if it did, we'd have some perspective that lasts more than about 12 seconds. So that was my premise. And what I was going to then say is, if we really want to gain some perspective on this, thoughts and prayers won't do, some hand wringing and solemn music won't do. We need to have an ongoing conversation, a serious conversation about a number of issues, including, although not limited to, domestic violence. And are those who play a belligerent and violent game more inclined to it than their athletic peers? The effects of football itself, concussions, damage to the prefrontal cortex, which has an effect on impulse control and emotional restraint, especially if mixed with performance-enhancing drugs or alcohol, and who knows what else. And then also our entire relationship, especially within the sports world, to guns. Not talking here about anyone's responsible, lawful exercise of the legitimate Second Amendment rights, but there is a gun culture in sports. Just Google athletes and guns and look at the long list of criminality, folly, tragedy associated with athletes and guns. And if you want to be fair and you want to counter it, take a look at how short the list is of any occasions where a prominent athlete, by virtue of having a gun, turned a bad situation around for the better. I'm not saying it never happens, but the number of times it happens is scant alongside the very long list on the other side. That was my idea. But now I had half as much time as you usually have for the halftime thing. And a producer handed me, printed out from the internet, a column that Jason Whitlock, who ironically is now a hero of right-wingers, but Jason Whitlock, who had played football himself, had covered football, was a Kansas City-based sports writer. He had written a long response to what had happened. And one passage was about the gun culture in the country and in sports, which ended with, if Jovan Belcher did not possess a gun, I, Jason Whitlock, believe that he and Sandra Perkins would be alive today. All right. I thought, foolishly, now the producer hands this to me, but it's on me. I'm the goalie. I'm the guy who has the final say. So I had to look at it. We were rushed, much more rushed than we usually are, but the essence of live television, and I think I've been pretty good at this over a long period of time, sometimes stuff just happens. It's incoming. What is this? Something happens at the Olympics. Somebody you've never heard of does something fantastic. Who is he or she? Quickly tell me. Okay, what is this? Okay, I got it. And you try to synthesize it and you make something out of it that makes sense. In this case, I thought that one passage, which the producer called to my attention, was self-evidently true. It seemed to me that it was self-evident that
Right.
you're not talking about the Second Amendment. You're talking about if people are influenced by a culture coming from different directions, including music, movies, right-wing talk radio, whatever it might be, that makes us a little more trigger happy or makes the gun a first resort, then nothing good comes of that attitude, which has nothing to do with a single mom having a gun and somebody breaking into her house.
Right.
Nothing to do with any of that. All right. I thought that was self-evidently true. That was foolish on my part, because I soon found out that there are people who are triggered, no pun intended, by any reference, that they go from A to Z, from 0 to 100, and that even mentioning this means that what you really want to do is confiscate everybody's guns, and then we'll all be at the mercy of either criminals or a tyrannical government. Okay, so that was my mistake. I didn't have time to make the full point. I haven't arrived at the full point I just made subsequently. That's what I thought. If you and I were sitting down to talk about it, that's what I thought on that night in December 2012. It's what I thought for a very long time.